Okay, cool. Well, hello everyone. My name is Wendal Kane. I'm a range ecologist for the Spokane tribe of Indians out here in northeastern Washington. And I'm just gonna sort of talk about some of the challenges we have in managing our noxious weeds on the reservation out here. So just a little bit of background about the history of weed control on the reservation. Our DNR has several different departments that have in the past completed various weed control projects. You know, we have wildlife folks doing habitat work with herbicides and mowing. You know, we have a range program doing revegetation as well as spraying and various other programs as well. However, there wasn't a lot of coordination between these departments, and all their goals vary a little bit. And there's also not a lot of weed management after our wildfires. So in 2021, we contracted a development of our integrated weed management plan, which guides and prioritizes our weed management activities for all the departments together. And then we hired an ecologist, myself, to kind of coordinate the surveying of weeds and the management of them as well. And so the first thing we had to do is find out where all of our weeds are. You know, we have been treating them, but we didn't really know the kind of how far spread out they are and the areas that they primarily grow. So we started doing a sort of qualitative survey over the past 2 field seasons and just kind of documenting where we see weeds, what weeds are present, how big the patch is, and came up with an estimated cover. And we sort of found out that there are weeds all over the place. Most of them exist in our recent burns in the last decade, where we see patches of 1,000 acres of toadflax and skeleton weed. And then also we've noticed in areas where we've done logging, a lot of the equipment staging areas, slash piles, things like that are areas that thistles will grow. And then we also have a lot of issues along our waterways with reed canary grass, flowering rush. And in general, outside of those areas, we just find weeds in our drier locations and that have south-facing slopes. So down at the bottom, those are some of our priority weeds. And our biggest focus is finding weeds that we have not found yet. You know, we know most of these weeds are spread out and we're sort of in a management scenario, and we want to keep it that way. We don't want to have new weeds spreading onto the reservation. And then up top on that map, those are just all of our weed points that we've documented in the last 2 years. And then to go along with that survey, we do some more focused quantitative monitoring. I don't want to get too much in the details here, but the main point here is so far we've done 23 random 1-acre plots across the reservation, and all of them but 2 had a state listed noxious weed present. Most of them had at least 2 species, and almost half of those plots had a noxious weed cover greater than 25%. So yeah, we have weeds all over the place here, and that's kind of where we're starting at. So, and we can use the results of both of those surveys to generate these maps to help us focus our efforts. So this is just an example of our thistles on the reservation. The color stands for the estimated cover. So the darker spots have a higher cover of thistle. And then the size is just the patch size. And we can kind of see up in the top there, that's where a lot of our forests are, where a lot of our logging operations, clear cuts have happened. And that's where we see a lot of our thistle patches. And so to get into the management, you know, we are mostly trying to manage these weeds for wildlife habitat, fish habitat, and wildfire risk. And so the big thing that comes to people's minds when we talk about managing weeds is herbicide use. Herbicides can be a very useful tool. However, they are not our only tool. The reservation has had some issues in the past with some roadside spraying, killing off some trees. So within our tribal government and the local community, there's definitely some negative sentiment towards their use, which is totally understandable. And we also don't allow aerial spraying. So in past positions down in Nevada and Oregon, that's pretty much what we relied on to control some of our weeds. So for me, I've had to kind of adjust how I go about managing these issues. And then the reservation out here has a lot of water, and we want to be really conscious of fish populations and cultural resources. So we have to be really careful about where we're spraying herbicides when we do that. And so we have to look at maps, buffer zones. We even take into account soils and water tables just to make sure that we are not causing more issues with our weed management. And because of all that, we almost exclusively resort to spot spraying. It's great because we have a lot of control of where our herbicides go. We minimize herbicide drift to prevent damage to native plants and trees and waterways. However, this can be slow and time consuming, and having our guys have backpack sprayers on all spring and fall can have some negative impacts to morale. So we need to think about other options for weed control as well. And so two other popular strategies that we utilize quite a bit are biocontrol and mechanical weed control. So biocontrol typically is releasing insects that are exclusive to a noxious weed as its host. So sometimes these are pathogens as well, but generally you release them and they can sort of help keep your population in check while you implement other strategies in your management process. The great thing about biocontrol is it's sort of easy. You just release your agent, whether it be an insect or a pathogen, and then just sort of keep an eye on it and make sure it establishes. And it's relatively cheap compared to our other management activities. Some of the issues we have with this is you have to kind of understand your agents. So you have to have a good knowledge of entomology or plant pathology to be able to track your success in these releases. And it can be difficult to report on deliverables. We've been looking at a lot of grants recently, and they want to know how many acres we controlled with an agent. And when you just release it in one spot, and it can take several years for that population to grow and start controlling your weeds, it can be difficult to actually give a solid number there. And down in the corner, we have a Dalmatian toadflax plant, and that has the stem boring weevil on it. We have plenty of the stem boring weevil out here on the reservation. So we go out in May or June, try to find some patches that have this weevil present and try to spread it to other areas where we haven't found it yet. So then along with biocontrol, we also use mechanical methods. Typically, this is using a mower or weed eater, and this is great because we can use these in sensitive areas where we otherwise wouldn't be able to spray an herbicide. So riparian areas, some culturally sensitive areas, near people's homes, things like that. It can also be slow and tough on field crews, and it requires several revisits to treat the same area. So it can be hard to make a huge impact with this, but if you focus your management activities on small and new patches, this is a really useful tool for us. The one issue we see with this is in the summertime, we get limited by fire restrictions. Typically when it dries out here in late June or early July, our crews can't be in the field past 1, and we're not allowed to use any power equipment that could spark a fire. So then it means we also have to train our guys on how to minimize fire risk when using this equipment. And then it just sort of narrows our window of opportunity to get at some of these weeds before they start flowering and setting seed. So that's typically how we control most of our weeds. The one set of weeds that is difficult to control this way are invasive annual grasses. These are on a lot of people's minds these days, and rightfully so. They change our fire cycles. They can influence water tables and have a pretty large effect on our native plant communities. So the ones that we see quite a lot of are cheatgrass, Japanese brome, bulbous bluegrass. I haven't seen any Ventonata dubia yet, but it doesn't mean it's not here. They are all pretty widespread, though I have not found many places where they are the dominant plant. So that's good. That gives us an opportunity to try to stop them from spreading more and becoming monocultures.
Wendal, 4 minutes.
So thank you. So spraying these grasses can be tough. Typically in the communities we see them, we have a lot of good bunch grasses that are great wildlife forage, cattle forage. And so we don't want to just go out and start spraying and killing off what we do have. And a few people have considered using pre-emergent herbicides that would basically prevent these grasses from germinating. But there are concerns with soil retention time and preventing other plants from germinating as well. So our answer to the invasive annual grass issue is utilizing revegetation. Planting native plants can help outcompete these weeds and grasses, and also has a bonus of increasing your wildlife habitat value, your range ecosystem value. And so we have two options there. We can throw seeds out on the landscape, and this can be tough, really tough, because native seed is really expensive. And the equipment for getting it on the ground can also be pricey. And the terrain out here on the reservation is steep, it's rocky, and from the few wildfires we've had recently, there's a lot of downed wood. And so we can't really get big tractors and implements out on the landscape and effectively get seed on the ground. So our plan is, once we start initiating these larger revegetation projects, is to rely on broadcast seeding. And that is usually an effective way to get seeds out on the landscape, but it is not as successful as drill seeding most times. So that means we have to use more seed. So it just increases our cost, but that it is still a really great way to compete with some of these annual grasses. And other ways we plant are using container stock of shrubs and trees. This is primarily in riparian zones to try to shade out mostly the reed canary grass. That's a tough plant to manage, but getting some shade over it can reduce its ability to set seed in the fall. So that is our plan there. The sort of management issue we have with this is just cost. There's a high labor cost to install and maintain these. And then buying a bunch of 1 gallon plants, the price adds up pretty quickly there.
Just about a minute and a half left.
Okay, thank you. And then, so to wrap it up, outside of the sort of on the ground issues, there's some other issues we have. One is a mosaic of land ownership. We have tribal trust lands, allotments that could have 50 different owners on them, private fee land, Bureau of Rec land. So some of these property boundaries can inhibit our projects. We all know that invasive species don't necessarily follow the lines we like to draw in the sand. And then we are trying to manage noxious weed vectors so that we're not adding new species of noxious weeds onto the reservation. Our forests get heavy use, so we're coming up with education materials to let other departments and community members know about this. And then of course, funding. I'm sure everybody knows those issues. And then the last point is that we're sort of out in the middle of nowhere. There's a large part of our employee retention issues that we have are because we're an hour away from the nearest city, and we tend to get people come here, get a year of experience, and jump ship and go work in somewhere they feel is nicer. And yep, just want to point out that we do collaborate a lot with local governments, agencies, other tribes. So that is a huge part of our weed management efforts, especially with the flowering rush in the Columbia Basin. And with that, if anyone has any questions, you can email me or call me. And thank you all for attending this workshop.